Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I'm honored to have AJ Guyton with me. AJ is a former Chicago Bull and Golden State Warrior. He was also the Big Ten Men's Basketball Player of the Year, and today I'm excited to highlight his story because I really think what you're going to hear is a story of, overcoming odds. AJ wasn't always the biggest guy, but he certainly had the heart and wanted it the most. So, AJ, thanks so much for being on.
Hey, thanks for having me, Phil. Excited.
Yeah. So just to start your story, when you were in grade school, you were kind of hoping to start taking basketball a bit more serious, and you went to a basketball camp, and there was a
Mhm.
Duke basketball player that gave you three important things to focus on if you wanted to be really good at basketball, and it stood out to you. So talk a little about the camp and what you heard that day.
Yeah, I fell in love with basketball early. I was probably like 7 or 8 years old. But when I was around 11 or 12 years old, I got my first opportunity to go to a basketball camp. And back then, it was exciting to go to those camps because, you were able to stay the night. You just got
Yeah.
with mom and dad for a little bit. And it was just an awesome experience at Illinois State at the time. I believe Bob Bender was the coach. I remember Monmouth coach King Rice being one of the assistants, and and our guest speaker ended up being Thomas Hill from Duke.
Yeah.
The small forward from Duke, won a couple of national championships at Duke. But I just remember him talking about really really downplaying expectations to go to the NBA.
Mm,
And he was just like, if you look around, there's probably one person in here that's going to make it to the NBA. You know
wow.
what I mean? And it was like, dang, because it's about 300 of us in there. So it was
Yeah.
like, it's kind of a crushing blow, not realizing that I would end up being the only one. Or not
Mm,
I'm saying the only one, but one of the ones that in that group that actually made it to the NBA. So, he gave his speech and, it inspired me. It inspired me to go to college, really. I wasn't thinking about the NBA. I was just impressed with how he looked as a college basketball player, how he spoke as a college basketball player. And that's where my inspiration to play in college actually began, was at that camp.
I love it.
Mhm.
Now, you went to a very prestigious high school
Mhm.
and a very competitive high school. And so I think, a lot of people, as I introduce you, would hear, oh man, he played in the NBA. Surely he's
Yeah.
been like, starting on varsity since seventh grade or eighth grade. And that just wasn't the case at your high school. So talk a little about, coming into an environment where there's really good players and it's, a really winning program, and you kind of have to work your way into the rotation.
Absolutely. Well, my journey started in grade school, and in grade school, I tell people all the time, in fifth grade, I didn't touch the court. But I was at a grade school that was known for basketball, and
Yeah.
and I had a lot of good players that went on to play in high school that I ended up playing with. But I didn't touch the court my fifth grade year because the perception that people were, better than me, and people don't understand the aspect of development.
Mm,
Sometimes and there's a couple different ways. My way was, I was young. I was skinny. I was slow, but I was passionate about
yeah.
basketball. But some of my peers, they were advanced, they were stronger than me. I mean, the development process started earlier for them. And in basketball, it's better to be late than to be
Yeah.
early in terms of development. So I just remember my fifth grade year, guys became ineligible. And
Mm,
I sat the bench the entire year, like, and just cheering for them, being a great teammate, and all that type of stuff. I was just happy to be on the team. Became ineligible. I ended up playing, which toward the last two games of the season, which led towards me playing in sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. But even then, I wasn't one of the best player in the city. I never was able to claim that title as a sixth, seventh, eighth grader because it really doesn't matter. And then so when I got to, Peoria High School was one of four high schools here in Peoria, Illinois. You have Peoria Woodruff, you have Peoria Richwood, you have Peoria Manual, and Peoria High. And I was able to. I was living in Peoria High's district. My whole family went to Peoria High, so it was like you're going to Peoria High basically. But
yeah.
they had one of the toughest basketball programs to actually be a part of. And a guy by the name of Chuck Bishop, who's one of the greatest high school coaches here in the state of Illinois, winning percentage wise, won a couple state titles. He was the coach and he had a program, and I tell people like it's a difference between having a team and a program. So
Yes.
a program is year round. A team starts when the season starts.
Yep.
And he had a program and I remember my mom telling me, man, she said, because she grew up in the 70s and she went to Peoria High and graduated in 76. And she knew how important basketball was there. She's like, don't be surprised if you don't make it.
Mm.
I don't want you to get frustrated. You just got to keep working at it, but don't be surprised. So, just imagine her surprise, a couple months later when I tried out and I made it. But not only did I make it, I ended up being on the junior varsity on the sophomore team as a freshman. So
Yeah.
it was all because of the timing of of my development. My skills, but my height began to catch up with my passion and my skills. I just started to ascend, and I could see myself passing all my peers. I could see me getting better and better. But it was just over that summer of eighth grade going into freshman year where I began to grow. And I spent in an age where there are tons and tons of trainers. I didn't have it. No, we didn't have trainers. Like we didn't have any of that. My training was every day after school or every day I'm on the basketball court emulating Isaiah Thomas, Michael Jordan, and Larry Bird and Magic Johnson on the court every day, working on
Yeah.
some stuff that I see on their videotapes, just watching and emulating. That's how I learned how to play the game. So, now, like I said, not only did I make it, and my development happened at the right time, and I began to I began to prosper on the basketball court because of it. And so my freshman year I played junior varsity, and then my sophomore year I played varsity going forward. And I was still developing. I was
Yeah.
still slow. I still could see things I could do. It's like being older now. You see things you can do, but you can't do them anymore. But back then I could see it. I was like, man, I just ain't quick enough to get there yet.
Yeah.
But one thing I just continued to make sure that was tight was my jump shot because I knew my stepdad had told me, and anybody that can shoot can play.
Yep.
So coach is not going to sit a player that can make shots on the bench. And so while focusing on that, I continued to develop the other parts of my game and became, and it became a great opportunity to play at Peoria High.
Now, I want to, use what you just said. And someone listening right now is like, well, I never played basketball or I never went to the NBA. But I think there is a really important underlying principle, and that is if you work really hard even before you're ready, once the opportunity comes, you'll be ready, right? And I think that, is what you're saying, where, hey, maybe in fifth grade I wasn't the best player, but I was working towards wanting to become the best player. And then all of a sudden, the last two games of the year, I get the opportunity, and then all that hard work shows. And then that's the catalyst for sixth, seventh, eighth, freshman year. So talk a little about that, to somebody who's listening, just hey, talk about the preparation, even though the opportunity may not be presenting yourself, you're just never sure when it will.
Right. And this is a microwave society, obviously. Everybody, their parents think they can pay their kids opportunity in, but that's why you see so much confusion in the youth sports game and so much
Yeah.
anger and emotion now because nobody takes the time to let the process play itself out.
Yeah.
And the number one thing you have to be is just intentionally consistent. You have to be consistent. And what hard work is, you hear people throwing that word around like, "Oh, I've been working hard." It's like, no, what are you doing with the time that you allow? That you're
Yeah.
giving to this day. You know what I mean? I really spent every day. Like I used to tell my daughter that just to make sure she knows dad not exaggerating telling the story, because then I would take her to my mom and say, "Well, what did I used to do every day?"
Yeah.
Like, I mean, my mom knew where I was. She knew, he had an idea where I was. But sometimes if I couldn't get on that court, I'd go ride my bike to another court. But it was
Yeah.
intentional to be on a court and really focus on me, work on my game, and and then take that what I'm teaching myself and what I'm learning from these videotapes that I'm watching, and then go play against somebody else. So that's the really the key to it was my fifth grade year. Like, I played football as well, and as in what we call JFL, Junior Football League, and
Yeah.
I played from Pee Wee. I played junior varsity and lightweight. And so, I wasn't only just focusing on basketball. I was still playing football, but I knew where my passion lied. And I knew what I felt like was going to be my ticket. So,
Yeah.
just being intentionally consistent every day, working on the same move, working on the same shot every single day. So when my time came in fifth grade, it really changed my life. Like
Yeah.
if I wasn't ready, I don't know where I would be, today. But because of that passion that I had for the game and that was ingrained in me, I was ready and I took it and I never let go. Because even then, my sixth grade year, I had to learn, and I learned all these phases. I had to learn what being a role player was like
Mm,
because still wasn't the best player at all.
yeah.
I'm like the fourth best player on the team.
Yeah.
But I stayed in the pocket, I sat in the corner, and when that best player threw me the basketball, I was ready to knock it down because of
Yes.
all the shots that had been taken from fifth grade on up. I was ready. There would be games where I make 7, 8 shots in a row, just the same shot. You know
Yep.
what I'm saying? But I wasn't able, I still didn't have the off the dribble game. I just wasn't strong enough and ready for that. So I just took bits and pieces of that and took advantage of it when I got the opportunity. So, but like we talked about earlier, it was kind of in a society where that people don't have the patience to wait on
Yeah.
anything to develop. They don't. That's
Yep.
because that's discipline. You have to
Hmm.
be disciplined to wait and believe in something that you can't even see yourself, but is there. Like it's on the other side, but you just got to keep working to get there. And that's where we have to we have to reinstill those values into our kids because you're not going to just be good because mommy can pay for it. You have
Yeah.
to actually put the work in, so when you get the opportunity you can take advantage of it.
I love it. Now, throughout your high school career, you continue to progress, and once again, you're at an elite school, you become an elite player, and you end up signing with Indiana to go play for Bob Knight. But talk a little bit about, if what I know, AJ, is if you were good enough to get recruited and go play for Bob Knight, you're probably getting a lot of phone calls from a lot of schools because that was a very prestigious program, certainly at that time. So talk a little bit about, what made you pick Coach Knight in Indiana basketball.
Yeah, so my recruiting process was kind of like my development process. It was really methodical. It was kind of slow, and it wasn't as explosive as people would think.
Yeah.
My top, I think my top five, 4 or 5 schools were, I think Missouri, Michigan State, Indiana, Bradley, and St. Louis. Those were
Okay.
the
Yeah.
5 teams that I ended up settling on, and I ended up visiting Missouri, and they tried to make me commit early, and I declined. And basically, take it or leave it. Norm Stewart, take it or leave it. And I was like, I'm gonna leave it. I don't want any pressure. Bradley was a place that the coach pretty much ignored me on a visit.
Mm.
Like he really didn't. I don't know if he didn't think I was gonna come or he was busy, but he ignored me. So it really came down to St. Louis, Michigan State, Indiana. Now, Indiana, I was just talking about this last month because I visited Indiana and there was a guy by the name of Sharon Wilkerson who was there. He played at Indiana to 2 years before I arrived, and it was really surreal to see him because he was the reason I ended up at Indiana because
Mm.
Indiana was recruiting me early, but because we had a former Peoria High standout named Chris Reynolds, who's the athletic director at Bradley University now,
Yeah.
he actually he went to Indiana. And so they were constantly looking back at our program at
Yeah.
Peoria High to see if anybody else was coming. We had a guy named Bo Smith that went to Louisville that they was on their radar. So they was constantly looking. So they recruited me early, but they stopped recruiting me my junior year.
Mm.
And because they felt like they had their backcourt at Indiana with a guy named Sharon Wilkerson and a guy named Steve Hart. Well, just staying ready. So
Yeah.
I didn't commit early my junior year. I decided to kind of bet on myself. I was like, man, I'm better than, just Bradley's in the St. Louis. So I'm going to play high school season out.
Yeah.
And that's my senior year. But back then they were coming to high school games and they were recruiting at high school
All
games.
right.
So, I mean, it's not like now you got to go to an AAU event,
Yeah.
get some visibility. So, I ended up, I remember Tim Knight, Bob Knight's son being at the game and had a really good game. I actually had 2 points in the first half because they were playing a box and one.
Mm.
And I was being really unselfish and trying to get everybody involved. I didn't even know he was at the game. I don't even know who that was. But I ended up scoring like 30 points in the second half. And, they started re-recruiting me because Miss Sharon Wilkerson got in some issues at Indiana and he got kicked off the team.
Mm.
So this opened the scholarship up for me to
Yeah.
get recruited by Indiana. So now I have Indiana, St. Louis, and Michigan State. I had already visited Missouri and Bradley. Indiana was my third visit. I had Michigan State after that. And honestly, I was going to commit to St. Louis. Michigan State had a great team coming in. They had already had their freshman point guard, Martine Cleaves. That
Yeah.
group, they were coming in. I just didn't feel like I was going to play. And
Yeah.
whatever was going to happen, I wanted to play because I
Yeah.
knew I wouldn't be happy if I wasn't playing. So Charlie Spoonhour, the late Charlie Spoonhour, was the coach at St. Louis, and he was the only coach to actually come do an in-home visit with me.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So that meant a lot to me. But
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So, but I never made it down to up to Michigan State or down to St. Louis. I visited in Indiana, and I'm looking at the opportunity to play. I'm listening to Coach Knight. Never, he just the only thing Coach Knight guaranteed us was he was going to graduate us, and we
Mm.
were going to be successful men. We
Wow.
never talked about the NBA. We never discussed any of that playing time or any of that. When I went to Indiana, I just felt that home. Like I was like,
Yeah.
man, I think this is it.
Yeah.
Like they got everything. They got, exposure when it comes to television. They got education, and they have, I mean, this is it. They got an opportunity to play. Like,
Yeah.
so I knew that if I played well, I had an opportunity to play. So, about Coach Knight, as he did with most people, he just asked you also, are you coming to Indiana? And I just thought about it for about 2 seconds. I was like, yeah. That's how I committed to Indiana University. And people don't know that I committed in the spring of 1996, which is
Yeah.
going into my freshman year. So I
Yeah.
waited to the last minute. That was
Yeah.
April. I think it was April of 96 that I ended up committing, and I played my first game November of 96.
Now, Coach Knight obviously has a reputation that is large, right?
Mhm.
And there's certain people that disagree with certain antics. There's certain people that, probably really know him and understand the true heart behind some of those things. But as you're going in there, I always think a coach like that is you see what he does on the sidelines and you're like, well, I can imagine that it's probably even more aggressive behind the closed door
Right.
if that is what he's doing in public. And I think there's nothing wrong with those coaching styles, but you as a player have to know like I
Mhm.
can play for that, right? Like I can handle that type of criticism. I can handle that type of confrontation. And sometimes I think the, luster of Indiana makes
Mhm.
people think, oh, well, I could probably deal with that. And then all of a sudden they get there and they're like, oh man, I can't handle, this type of coaching. So
Right.
talk a little bit about that for you, whether that was a new style for you, or maybe that's the way your high school coach was or parenting was. And so it was like, all right, well, yeah, I can play for this.
Yeah, and you're correct when you say those things about Coach Knight. He was a different guy, like in a different time. And I don't, I always take people at face value. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like, I knew who Coach Knight was. I did my as I start the recruiting process, I started to research it because I didn't know who he really was. I live in Illinois and Bradley University country, where Hersey Hawkins and Jim Les were a big thing, and in Illinois were the Flying Illini at that time period. So that's all I saw. So I didn't really see much about Indiana. Other than what Chris Reynolds was able to tell me, and he let me know. It's like, man, he tough. Like, he
Yeah.
didn't sugarcoat it at all. Said he's gonna be on you. But back then, that's what your parents loved to hear. That's what they wanted for you. So,
Yeah.
but I didn't. What I think it's like someone going to a relationship thinking they can change the other person. I think a lot
Yeah.
of recruits thought they could go in there and then he would change who he was for them.
Yep.
And but they don't understand that he was at the peak of his powers.
Right.
And so he wasn't changing for anybody. So you had to, be do it as he acts and to be a part of that system. And And but I didn't experience what everybody believes that you experience in Indiana. Like it wasn't, aside from the incident where he put his hands around the neck of a player, he put his hands around the neck of me in a loving manner before. So it was
Yeah.
like that was something that when it wasn't like malicious and I'm trying to kill you. He was like, why did you try? Why did you, I turned the ball over. I think it was my freshman year and I kicked the ball out of bounds in the first half, trying to take off dribbling
Yep.
without, before I even had the ball. And then I did it again in the second half. We were winning the game by like 10. And he just like, as a love, and I was like, that's how he showed love to people.
Yep.
And you know what I mean? So some people can't take that, and some
Yep.
people, and I understand that. So I just didn't understand why people would come play for someone and they own you like they said it was going to be on you, and all of a sudden you have to leave. So it affected us negatively because weren't able to ever establish the team to compete like we could because everybody kept leaving. And
Yep.
so I never had a problem with Coach Knight's coaching style. I love his coaching style. I was sending my son to go play for him because I know that you were going to leave with an experience of a lifetime. And you don't really realize it until you get done playing and how people react to you just because you played for Coach Knight and you were part of that family and part of that system. But to be honest with you, man, we had more freedom than any players that I know of. And I used to talk to players and they would be shocked. Like, a lot of players were they were forced to do certain things. They were forced to, do study table. They were forced to. We never were forced to do anything. We never had study tables. We never had any of that stuff. Like we never had curfews. And you would
Yeah.
think like it was just crazy strict. We just knew what our job was, and he recruited kids that knew what they were supposed to do and had discipline already ingrained in them, so he wouldn't have to do that. Of course, you have a player here or there that goes AWOL,
Yeah.
but they had to deal with that. But Coach Knight was a joy to play for, man. He was we almost respected him too much. As I
Yeah.
look back, I felt like I said, now we had too much respect for him. We treated him, we approached him like he was a guy. We didn't approach him like he was a man. And
Yeah.
that's the mistake that we made because we weren't able to build those type of relationships that changed into championship culture because we trusted him and his experience, and we just fully trusted him instead of obviously believing in ourselves. So Coach Knight was not difficult to play for, and he was fun to play for.
I love it.
Mhm.
Now, for you, you weren't the Illinois Mr. Basketball. However, freshman of the year in the Big Ten
Right.
is an accolade that you were able to, receive. And so talk a little bit about that. I mean, you already hinted earlier, Michigan State was bringing in, the Mo Petersons, the Mateen Cleaves, like, some star-studded classes. The Big Ten was tough at this time. And,
Mhm.
here's a guy that I'm not going to say he's flying under the radar, but, maybe hasn't had as much national prominence as other players that are coming in. And here he is at the end of the year with freshman of the year. So talk a little bit about that freshman
Yeah.
season and getting that accolade.
Yeah, I was not, like I said, I was not highly recruited.
Yeah.
So, now you hit the term right on the head, man. I definitely was able to fly under the radar because nobody expected anything of me. I think I was like number 47th or 46th ranked senior in the country.
Yeah.
And I came in a class of like Kobe was number one in our class. Tim Thomas and Michael Bibby was one of the guards. Like it was
Yeah.
loaded from top. Steven Jackson and these guys were Rip Hamilton. All these dudes were like, I've never mentioned in those same breath. Even to this day, I don't get mentioned in that class.
Yeah.
But I never thought about. I was never bitter about. Never thought about it. All I could do, I took it one step at a time, and I felt like coming into Indiana, I just looked at our roster and I just felt like if I have a great opportunity here to play, not only play but start. If I just make sure that I'm productive when I get on the basketball court, and I bring something different. And
Yeah.
so, when I came in, and people were shocked. They didn't know who I was. I mean, I remember playing in a scrimmage a game against each other, and people like I'm walking, and when I walk in the game to come to the scrimmage, nobody say anything. They don't even know I'm a player. You know what I mean? Like, is that a
Yeah.
manager? We had managers like that time. So, but then when after playing that game, I left. Everything changed. You know what
Mm.
I mean? Like to the point where, I can't, I got to sign autographs. I got to talk to everybody now. It was like all in this midnight madness scrimmage when I was a freshman in college. So, to be able to become, and I didn't have those goals in mind. I wasn't thinking like Big Ten freshman of the year. I didn't even know that
Yeah.
existed. To be honest, I didn't know accolades existed because I didn't play for accolades. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
just played to try to win that whatever particular game I was playing. I played to try to win that game. And
Yeah.
now you see guys they're kind of they're controlling their destiny. They're
Yeah.
creating legacies themselves. So
Yeah.
everything, all that stuff that Michael Jordan went through and all that stuff was organic. Like they didn't
Mhm.
really plan. I'm gonna go win 7 MVPs. Like that
Yeah.
was like I'm just gonna play. I'm gonna lead. I'm gonna win, and the awards will come. So to be able to win freshman of the year and to have a plaque, and be Dick Vitale's freshman national freshman of the year coming from where I came from was just like it's still surreal to this day because I never thought about it. Like I was like
Yeah.
just wanted to play and everything changed after that freshman year of just being extremely productive. And people don't know this as well. Like when I played, like it wasn't like I came in blazing. Like it was like a slow, gradual build.
Mm.
I remember my first game against UConn. I only had like 7 or 8 points that game. And I didn't
Yeah.
make any jump shots, and shooting is my thing. So people were leaving, scouting us thinking I couldn't shoot.
Mm.
And I missed my first 18 or 19 threes my freshman year. And you know what I'm saying? First, if I was 0 for 18, and I made my first three against Duke in the Garden. Finally made one. And then it just kept building steadily and steadily, but I never lost confidence. I knew I could shoot. I
Hmm.
was focused, like I told my daughter, I said I was focused on the other things. I was like,
Yeah.
let me prove that I'm the quickest player here. Let me prove that I'm the best guard defender here. Let me
Yeah.
prove that I can push the tempo. So that I bring something different to Indiana basketball because as I began to develop, there's only one player who played at Indiana the way that the style that I played, and that was Isaiah. It was
Mhm.
like, creativity and breaking off plays and playing one-on-one. Coach Knight, he really wasn't feeling that back then. It was all
Yeah.
motion, move the
Right.
ball, and but I get it. And I'm just if I can get there, I'm getting there. But I made sure that I got there. So getting that confidence my freshman year, getting his confidence it was big for me. It enabled me to continue to grow because I saw that I was cracking the code. That's
Yeah.
how I looked at Coach Knight, like cracking the code. Like he's such a hard gangster exterior, but when you figure out what he likes and you keep doing that, that's how you crack the code. And I
Yeah.
figured out, oh, he likes when I can break it down, when I can do it the right way without being crazy fancy and just be productive. So, that's what enabled me to become freshman of the year.
I love it. Now, as you're building on this, in '98, you get the opportunity to go compete in the Olympics
Mm,
and win a gold medal. So, talk a little about, once again, there's levels to this thing, right? You go from,
mm,
all right, I'm competing to be one of the best players in Illinois. Now I'm trying to be one of the best players in the Big Ten, and then, competing for the Olympic gold is the best in the country, right? So, talk a little about, that process and
right.
getting the gold.
Yeah, so I rewind it a little bit because I think it's important to note that
Yeah.
as good as I was becoming after my junior year of high school, everything changed for me because I was invited to a Nike camp, and so I'd like to tell people like kids, especially kids, like there are levels to competition, and
Yeah.
especially when you're from a small town, you don't always get to see the highest level. Like when you're
Mhm.
from Chicago, you're from LA, you get to see that. You may get to see Michael Jordan in action. You get to see we didn't have that in Peoria, Illinois. So I was
Yeah.
able to go to Nike camp, and that's where everything changed because I realized that and as good as I was, I'm averaging 21 a game as a junior. I'm all state, I'm all there, I'm all everything in my area. But I went to Nike camp and I got to see, I got to see Mateen Cleaves. I got to see Baron Davis as a
Yeah.
junior. I got to go up against these dudes. I'm like, oh, this is different. I
I'm
need to get in the
gonna need
gym.
to work a
You
little
know?
harder. Yeah,
So
yeah,
so that catapulted me. So when I came back from that, my whole quote unquote workout for myself changed. It was about being more quicker, being more explosive, moving faster, making
Yeah.
quicker decisions, shooting quicker. So, that was a big change. And but you have to get outside of your comfort zone to see that. I had to leave Peoria, go to Indianapolis, get this invite in order for me to see all this talent and where it stands as where I stand, because I'm still developing at this point.
Yeah.
So now fast forward to 98. So it was the Goodwill Games. It wasn't the Olympics. And I don't
Okay.
know what they call the Goodwill Games now. I don't know if it's the European, I don't know if it's the championships or they've
Okay.
changed the name of it since then, but they still do it. I don't want to say the wrong name, but I was selected on the team. Elvin Brand was on that team. Andre Miller was on that team. Keith Carter from Ole Miss. It was a good collection of talent, and we actually ended up losing our first game, but we won the rest of the games and the gold medal because you were young. We were playing against pros, so
Yeah.
that was like to go from to not being to being on a bench or to be a bench player and to find myself sitting in a USA jersey. Watching Australia playing against Australia, playing against
Yeah.
these teams was amazing. It still is. I didn't, you don't really value those things until you get older
Yeah.
because as I'm just going every year. Like I'm going from the Goodwill game, I'm going from Big Ten freshman of the year to all conference. I'm going from all conference to the Goodwill Games. I'm going to from the Goodwill game back to my team, and Playboy All American. Like I'm doing all this stuff, so
Yeah.
you never really get time to sit and think about. All right, man, dang, you're really accomplishing some phenomenal things to have a gold
Yeah.
medal, and man, is special. There's not many people that can say, especially from this city, that they have a gold medal.
Yeah.
So but that I was also humbled in that experience because not really humble, but I didn't play a lot.
Yeah.
I played a lot early, and then my playing time kind of tapered off because Andre Miller was a little bit more mature than me as a guard at that time. But once again, I was able to be a role player because I had that experience as a kid. I
Yeah.
knew I knew both sides of it. See, a lot of
Mhm.
guys, they're so talented, they never see it from the other person's perspective. And so they become selfish. It's
Yep.
about me. I don't get to play I. But because I had that experience as a fifth grader, and I was able to take that Clem Haskins. I made Clem Haskins pay for that when I was played against Minnesota that year.
Yeah.
But at that time, I was just happy, like once again, happy to be a part of the team, happy to be a part of the practices, and it was sharpening. It was continue to sharpen my iron at the end of the
Yep.
day. Because kid from Peoria, Illinois, I don't get to really experience these type of things. So to be pioneering and be the first person from my city to do something like that was special. Not as a male because we had Carla McGee, who's actually won a gold medal. So in the Olympics. So,
Yeah.
but it was a special time, man. Like I just get chills thinking about it.
Yeah. Now, once again, you're building the resume. And so now we're
Yep.
heading into, kind of the Latin, senior year, year 2000,
Mm.
with your time in Indiana, and you end up being the Big Ten Player of the Year. And I would imagine, going into that year, there's some thoughts of like, all right, I've put together a pretty good resume. Maybe the NBA is possible.
Right.
So talk a little bit about, that final year and once again being Player of the Year, and then also, the goal of, hey, I,
Yep.
I remember what Mr. Thomas told me at that basketball camp, years and years ago, and now it's looking like this could be possible for me.
Yeah, and so the NBA, I missed my our real opportunity to be a first round draft pick my sophomore year. I
Mm.
had a phenomenal sophomore year. I was one of the top 2 point guards in the country. I was playing the point guard position at that time because we had the personnel for me to play it. And but the one thing about Indiana University at that time is what Coach Knight did a hell of a job of was keeping the NBA out
Mm.
of the confines of Indiana University. We didn't have pro days. Pro scouts weren't allowed to come. Coach Knight didn't have great relationships with the NBA because he hated the NBA. So and then back then it wasn't this media circus where you
Right.
can touch it and you can grab it. So when you're in college at that time, you're just moving forward. You're not thinking about. So I didn't realize I could have been a top 10 draft pick until I graduated till with my later years. I had no idea. I'm like, well, I missed my opportunity because I was really everybody was starting to transfer. Neil Reed left my friend, and that's one thing. The mental health part of being a college basketball player at that time that I didn't have any clue of what I was kind of going through was just the loss. We were losing players, and through different situations. Neil Reed left after my freshman year, was a huge hit to our team. During my sophomore year, a guy named Jason Collier, he transferred to Georgia Tech during that time period. And so going into my junior year, I'm thinking about leaving. I'm like, oh, everybody leaving. Why am I, what I mean? Why am I staying here? But what I quickly realized, and I did at this time, I did know somebody that had connections to the NBA. And my projection was probably going to be second round, whether I stayed or whether I went. So I'm like, if I'm going to be second round, whether I stay or go, then I might as well just stay. Like it don't even, what I mean, it don't even make sense to leave because I could submit my legacy here at Indiana, but also, I can have fun. Like, and I want to graduate and make and get my degree, which was the sole goal of going to college anyway. So I ended up deciding to stay at Indiana after my junior year, going into my senior year. So the decision to go to stay was simple, was easy, because like I said, I wanted to graduate, and I knew I wasn't going back to school. School it was simple for me, but it's something that I didn't enjoy. I didn't like the school part of it. I liked the social part of it, but going to class, which I did every day, I was very disciplined in school. I didn't see it like everybody else saw it. So to be able to go but start to think about the NBA didn't really start hit me till that junior year. It was like, oh, you got a chance. You know what I mean? And not having that information, not even thinking about it in hindsight, it kind of hurt me because I didn't force the things that I need to happen for me to have a long NBA career. See, but Indiana played a different style. Indiana played motion offense. There was no motion offense going on in the NBA.
Right.
You had to be a pure point guard at that time. And so those things hurt me going Indiana. So because I never played pick and roll before until I got to the NBA. And people don't understand you have to be taught how to play the pick and roll. It's an art form to it. You don't just go use it and just shoot it like like my mentality was. But just not having that background from our coach and not being able to understand what I needed to do simply because he didn't like it. You know what I'm saying? I had a podcast, I interviewed Isaiah Thomas, and he talked about how, we didn't run plays at Indiana, and so he talked about his adjustment to the NBA. We didn't run plays, and he never ran pick and roll before. But when you're a second pick as opposed to a second pick in a second round, you're going to get more opportunities to be developed, and that was kind of my thing. Just being, but I'm grateful, to be even like we talked about from where I came from, sitting the bench as a fifth grader, to where I was ending up. I'm like, oh, I'm one of the top 5 players in the country, like. Man, that's incredible to me to this day. Like I don't know why people don't have more respect for it, to be honest with you. Like people just don't, you never hear my name, you never hear me mentioned. I'm like, but all of it was unexpected. That's why I appreciated it so much. I appreciated, the work, putting the work in, like we talked about. And so being an NBA draft prospect at that time was like, it was surreal. Like I couldn't believe it. Like you know what I mean? To be, my name is considered to be first round or second round, whatever round, from where I come from, who knew?
Yes.
Know
Now, with that, you end up getting drafted to the Bulls. And I'm sure there's, something that's really cool about being, in Illinois, right? And going there. At the same token, I'm sure it's pretty difficult because you're joining in, 2000, which is not too many years after the greatest of all time has just retired. And, people are like, well, what the heck? This Elton Brand guy is supposed to be the next coming, and then what? I think year 2 for you, it's the Eddie Lacy or not Eddie Lacy, Eddie Curry and Tyson Chandler draft, and you're like, Well, we got two of the top four guys in the draft. Maybe this is our takeoff. And just talk a little bit about, that time frame in Chicago and coming in post Michael Jordan era and, trying to be the young guys revitalizing the city.
I'll say I enjoyed it, and I lived in that moment, but I wish I could enjoy it and lived in it even more. It was an awesome experience, man. I got drafted the second pick of the second round. At the end of the day, when you look back, I just realized that as a player and my skill set, I was really just ahead of my time.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't a pure point guard. I could play point guard with ease, but what they were looking for and the way the game was, it didn't fit. End up fitting who I was at that time. But I still was able to get drafted by the Bulls. I want the Miami Heat to draft me. And the reason why I want them to draft me is because I knew Pat Riley would give you rookies an opportunity to play.
Mhm.
Like he didn't have any biases against players at being rookies like the Bulls did at that time. And but the Bulls drafted me and I went home to my home team. I was disappointed. I'm gonna rewind a little bit. And I regretted this too. I was very disappointed on draft night because I sat there and I watched guys who I annihilated in
Yeah.
basketball just get drafted before me. I mean,
Right.
it was a year that they had 9 Europeans going the first round. So, just think if like only two of them went, I would have easily slid into the first round.
Yeah.
So I'm at my draft party here in Peoria, like disappointed. That was the first time I was ungrateful, like because
Mm.
now I've been this good this long, I'm expecting it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And that's when I start expecting it, and that's when everything started to decline to a certain extent. Like, instead of going first round, I ended up going second round. I felt humiliated, but I was like, now I'm like, why would you be humiliated going second round, seeing your face pop up on the
Right.
screen? Like, but you're a first team All American, you one of the top
Yeah.
5 players in the country. It feels like somebody doesn't think I'm good enough. So,
Mm.
so I took that mindset into Chicago when we had a very young team. Jamal Crawford was their prize. He was drafted, I think, seventh or eighth, and traded from Cleveland to
Yeah.
Chicago. Marcus Pfizer was
Yeah.
I think he was fourth or fifth. That year we had Dalibor Bagaric, who was drafted 21st. So they took 3 first rounders, and then I was the first. No, I want to say Jake Voskuhl that was drafted before me, and then he drafted me at 32, and then they drafted Khalid El-Amin. So even though
Yeah.
they drafted to a perfect place, it's like a who's who of competition. I'm competing against Bryce Drew,
Yep.
El-Amin, Jamal Crawford, as for playing time. Like, what I mean? I'm like, dang, how I get in this situation? But I believed in myself. I'll never forget the first training camp. I don't think I missed a shot in training camp. Like I was like destroying these guys. You
Yeah.
know, like, and you can ask Jamal, you can ask Bryce, you can ask any. I didn't even understand how I was playing, but I was had such a chip on my shoulder. But then, obviously the business of basketball began to rear its ugly head. And
Yeah.
so, no matter how good you play, you're a second round pick.
Mm.
When it's time for those first round picks and those contracted players to play, you're going to sit the bench. And so that
Yep.
was kind of like the story. I had some great moments. I think Tim Floyd was our coach. He believed in me. He gave me an opportunity. He saw that I could defend at that position, which is when I went back into the same mentalities. Like, I want to do the other things. I know I can shoot. So let me do the other things. I was actually starting and playing, averaging 10 points, 4 assists a game. And then I got injured.
Mm.
I sprained my MCL against the Atlanta Hawks. And then that's when the games began. Once I had to sit out for 6 weeks, they would start to play, they're the money people. So, but I enjoyed that time in Chicago, man. The second year, we traded Tyson Chandler and Eddie Curry came in, the baby Bulls, and
Yeah.
it was the same result. We were young. We actually had the core. You think about it, we had Ron Artest, who ended
Yeah.
up a phenomenal NBA player. We had Jamal Crawford, who ended up being one of the top 6 men. Eddie Curry ended up being a serviceable big man. Tyson Chandler ended up being one of the
Great
best
career.
defenders. Like, we had Fred Hoiberg we had, then Jalen Rose came in. Like,
Yeah.
we had a lot of pieces when they traded Artest for Rose. So, You know, it was just timing. Timing is
Yeah.
everything. And the time wasn't great for me to be who I could ultimately become. But being still sitting and able to look behind me, you see pictures of me playing in a Bulls uniform, full NBA games. I just saw a video where Kenny Smith said there's only 5,100 total players to play in the NBA over 75 years or whatever
Yeah.
it is now, 76 or what it is.
Yeah.
That is incredible to me. It put a smile on my face to know that I didn't even think that I was gonna be this in this situation. I never knew. I never thought about it. Like I knew everybody wants to play in the NBA, but you're from Peoria, you sit in the bench and you it's from in grade school. You're a good
Yeah.
high school player. You become a great high school player, but you're still not in the top tier of your class. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Still behind all these players. And I got to play against Mateen. I got to play against Shaheen Holloway, who was all in front of me, all these players. And I to be at that point and sitting in the locker room in the Bulls uniform was incredible for me. So, I had to get back to appreciating where I was.
Yeah. Now, as the NBA, contract kind of runs its 3-year course, you end up going
Yep.
overseas. But while you're overseas, you get a diagnosis of glaucoma, which that's
Yeah.
a problem as a basketball player, right?
That's,
There's a lot of things in life where that could be, serviceable. You can figure it out, but as a basketball player, that's pretty high importance. And so, talk a little bit about getting that diagnosis and just one the emotional, piece of it, but two, then, working through it because you continue to play even after having that diagnosis.
yeah, yeah. I mean, so when I was playing in Reggio Calabria, Italy in 2006, and I'll never forget it. We were playing and somebody shot the ball bounces on the rim. I kind of get in position to rebound. So, when you get in position to rebound, you take a quick look over your shoulder, and then your peripherals can tell you where the ball is. You don't have to
Yeah.
be staring at the ball. So I just never forget. I turned and I looked and I got ready and I'm looking up and the ball kind of dropped right in front of me. Like I
Yeah.
didn't even see it. And I was like, man, what was that? How did
Yeah.
I miss that ball? So long story short, I ended up, I started to pay attention to my vision. I mean, I didn't know anything about glaucoma, but my sister worked at a place in Peoria called Illinois Eye Center. When we were done with the season, I went to, she told me she would give me a checkup. Everything was free because she worked there.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't have any insurance as a European player. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So, you ain't thinking about stuff like they just pay for everything because you got the
Yeah.
money. But she was able to get me examined, and when he examined me, and I could tell by his face, like, man, your pressures are up in the upper 50s. He was like, what do you know anything about glaucoma? I was like, I heard that in a movie. That was the last Tucker said that in Rush Hour. And that's what
Yeah.
I knew about glaucoma. And so I started that process in 2006, and to restore, get my eye pressures lower, I had to have 2 or 3 surgeries to relieve the pressure. It was an aggressive form, and I was young too, So it's like,
Yeah.
so I had youth on my side, but I had to continuously. I still have to this day continuously monitor that because it just eats away at your vision from the outside in, and you don't know it. You don't feel any symptoms. I never felt symptoms. I do remember one situation in 2005 where I was playing in Virtus Bologna, and I couldn't play in the game because there was an inordinate amount of rings around lights. Like it was like somebody with like shining bright lights on you, and I just couldn't play. So that was my first sign. That's why the glaucoma was so advanced at the time that I actually caught it, was because I think it started the year before.
Mm.
And been fighting it ever since, man. It never stops. I have to continue to go to the ophthalmologist and get but I was able to still play. I didn't lose a lot of vision. I lost like a 10% of my vision, my what you call it. I'm just my vision from the top. I lost about 10% of that, but I was able to overcome that by just being more focused than when I'm playing. So now I have to be more focused. And when
Yeah.
everything was just natural to me, now I had to make sure I'm looking and make sure I see, because I didn't have peripherals in every angle anymore. So,
Yeah.
so this is a dangerous thing, especially for young African American men that feel like they have issues with their vision. Man, you need to really get that checked. So it was an eye opener for me. No pun intended.
Well, to bring the conversation full circle, AJ, you end up having a daughter that becomes passionate about basketball, loves basketball, and
Yep.
she is in her freshman year at Iowa, and obviously Iowa has been on every national radar for basketball for a few years now. But talk a little bit about knowing all you knew after having the career you had, and right, knowing there's levels to this thing, right? Like, hey,
Mhm.
you think you're working hard, but there is someone in California that is working twice as hard. You just haven't seen them yet.
Right. Yeah.
But yet at the same token, I always think it's the balancing act, right? Of being a parent and not just, pushing your kid to want to play basketball because you want that for them, or what it can provide. So talk a little about just being in that dad role and helping your daughter progress and gain as much skill as she wants, all the while not being the dad that wants it more for her than she wants it for herself.
Yeah, so my daughter Aaliyah Guyton, she's a freshman at Iowa. She had a phenomenal high school career here. I had to sacrifice my coaching career in order to get her through a process for her to be successful. And that's the first thing I want to talk about is how the process of being a basketball player has changed.
Yeah.
Because it's not organic anymore. It's not something kids just love. Now I'm saying every kid, but most kids are
Yep.
into social media. They're into the phones. They're into showing off how they look. They're into those things, and the parks are empty.
Mm.
So so when I recognized that my daughter was possibly a prospect was 2000, 2018 when I was in Loyola. I was coaching at Loyola University, Maryland, as an assistant coach, and just got my coaching career going. But unfortunately, I was like a single dad at the time. Like I wasn't able to balance coaching at Loyola and being a father.
Yep.
And and I knew I said, she's gonna need me through this process because
Mm.
it's not the same anymore. She's not gonna be able to just go outside, be gone for 12 hours
Yeah.
playing basketball. Like what father
Yep.
wants his daughter going that long? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, when I told myself you're gonna have to establish the process for her. And
Mm.
you're gonna have to adjust to the way it is, and so I ended up. That's how I ended up back in Peoria, as an athletic director because I want to be able to focus on her and to help her at any time. So I had to take her in and I had to create training programs for her. I had to get her performance training. I had to make sure she played in open gyms and make sure he got her organic part of the game of basketball. And I always felt like if she could do that, she would stand out and amongst her peers, and that's what happened. And so as she began to get confidence, she began to believe in the process. She took it on herself, so I didn't have to do as much as I'd had to do earlier on. I would say the first 2 years of her high school career, I had to be like hands on because on top of that, you got many distractions. You got the good old boys, and you got all this stuff going on, but she remains in the gym. She remained committed to the process, and it's surreal when she got her first offer. Her first offer, I think, came from Ohio State. It was after a tournament, and I just thought it's such great validation as a quote unquote father and a trainer.
Yeah.
When everything you talked about works, and finally and they see it and they're like, oh, then the calls start coming in. It's like, oh, I told you, if you lock in and you stay consistent, you're gonna rise above
Yeah.
your peers, and that's the goal. It's like she got a chance to play on that stage in AAU, and she dominated at times, and she showed that she was good. And it was a steady climb for her. The more every tournament we played, the more confident she got. And she ended up going to Iowa. I was surprised that she went to Iowa. Surprised she chose Iowa because it didn't seem like she enjoyed the visit. And I told her that. I was like, "This looked boring." Like she looked bored, and she was like, "That's all right." I'm like, "I said, okay, we ain't going to Iowa." So I just knew that was it. So and then following not saying the shoe, but following Caitlin Clark, and
Yeah.
at the time they're having a great moment. And it was
Yeah.
like, I always worry about, continuing that moment.
Yeah.
Can you establish, continue this culture of winning? Forget Caitlin Clark, but can Iowa continue to win, and can you help? And she decided to take on that challenge. But unfortunately, got injured. She tore ACL back in January. I'm back in December of 23. And she's on the mend. She should be starting practice here in 2 weeks, and hopefully she'll be ready for her first game in late November, early December. So, it's as a father, man, and as a father, it's exciting to watch it. I always
Yeah.
FaceTime her and be like, can you trying to keep her in the moment? Can you believe that you're in college? Like
Yeah.
we were just taking AAU trips every weekend. Now you got the Iowa Hawkeye on with the
Yeah.
authentic stuff. So just super proud of her. To me, she's the best player ever, female player to ever play here in Peoria. And I just hope she continues that mindset into college. And that's what my job is, to help her keep that mindset, because nobody knew where she came from either. So
I have no doubts you will do
yeah.
that. Well, AJ, I want to say thanks so much for sharing your story and your journey. And it's so impactful to see the progressions. And so many people listening are sitting here saying, all right, these are the steps that I need to take. Enjoy the moment I'm in, but prepare for the next one. So that way, when it comes, I'm ready. So thanks so much, AJ.
Thanks for having me, Phil. Thank you.